we had made contact with people from Plymouth who were salvage experts, divers, drove tugboats, etc. And they were working on the program where they were shutting off the two rivers in Cardiff to make a tidal lagoon. And they were Terry Stevenson and John Hayward, and they were subcontracted to a Plymouth organisation, Sea Structures. So what we had were people who were leading the world in lagoon wall building, and they were connected to the construction organisation Dean and Dyball, which was part of the Balfour Beatty group as a giant combine. The situation at Cardiff was they were making in the dry dock in a wooden mould in concrete, giant hollow boxes. And these boxes were towed out, and as it shows in the picture in my book, they form the breakwater to protect the area for vessels going in and out of the locks into the lagoon. Now, what was interesting about these box structures was in size. It can be seen by the pictures that they were a third of the size of the wall structure that was made with rock armour. So it meant less material was being used to make these boxes. The boxes, you could lay them so they formed a section like an arch, so you could put a curve on them. The other clever thing, you could fill them with waste material, that's building waste material in this case, and then concrete cap them so they were a solid wall. And it was this procedure that I decided that I could make lagoon walls 1/3 of the thickness or width then of other people's lagoon walls, and so put more money into the box product and the design of it and new materials. And the second thing was, being from the aircraft industry and knowing all about that if you send water or air around the curved surface, you actually make it flow faster. And the clever part about making the water flow faster in the Severn Estuary is this huge push from the Atlantic when the tide's coming in, and the further up the river it goes, the faster this tide gets. And there is a law called the cube law, which means that effectively, if you make the tide go 1 mile an hour or 1 knot an hour faster, you are doubling that amount of kinetic energy in it, which you can convert to produce electricity. So I started looking at this program, looking at the materials we had then, and one of the problems was the best material at that time to make the box structures of, the framework, was stainless steel, which was very expensive. But since then, there are people in the world like Pipex in Plymouth who can make similar structures, girders, frames, etc. And they can make them of a polypop-based material, which is stronger, lighter, effectively cheaper. But the good thing about it, they can guarantee it lasts in the sea 150 years. So we have a situation where you have a new nuclear station being built at Hinkley Point. Its life will be a maximum of 50 years. We can build lagoons in the Bridgewater Bay, and its life expectancy of its wall structure can be guaranteed 150 years. We can fill the boxes of our lagoon structure with all the silt that's in the Severn Estuary. We can top it up with heavy material from Cornwall, the ballast and waste on the spoil tips, so we can create hundreds of new jobs in Cornwall. And the situation is that combination of materials, the seabed material and the Cornish waste material, will turn to a form of concrete over time. So we now have a situation where I had discovered how to create flow around the walls, and this flow can activate certain types of pumps, and we can have a situation where we split the lagoon into two parts, an upstream and a downstream. The downstream remains pretty conventional. The upstream has a situation where we pump into it, when the tide comes in, millions of gallons of extra water with these pumps. And so inside it, we keep the water with a higher head so it flows out through the turbine. And we can even have pumps situated in the edges of this outflow, and we can recycle the water that we've just used and pump it back in again to keep this head height higher right through the slack water period. So we can now make our lagoons run 24 hours a day. And so that gives us a huge cost and commercial advantage over anybody else. The other area that we have is the situation where the lagoon can have floating solar panels within it. And in the Bridgewater Bay Lagoon design, it can have 20 square kilometers, and that 20 square kilometers will give us over 4,000 megawatts of electrical power. So our lagoons will have a multi-complex ability where the power from the solar during the day goes straight ashore into Somerset, and we have two giant gas making plants where we split fresh water into oxygen and hydrogen, so we can sell the hydrogen to the fuel cell industry and to those people currently running gas-fired power stations. So it can run your car, it can run your power station, it's totally green, the only thing it gives off is water. The other good thing about it is it dramatically reduces the cost of producing electricity, and every year it will get cheaper because it hasn't got the problem of major replacement that we have with other forms. Nuclear, for example, lasts 50 years. So in the time, the cost of our wall structure is equated. They will have to pay and produce and look after those nuclear power stations, and their costs will be off the clock in comparison to ours. And from this, we've now put in a proposal for the Swansea Tidal Lagoon, which the Welsh Government are looking at, and it has floating solar. It has an ability to produce oxygen and hydrogen and create a fuel cell corridor through Wales. It also can produce 5 times the power that was suggested by the previous people trying to get permission to build a lagoon. And the greatest thing we can do is produce all of this technology with no subsidy. And how we're going to do that is initially we are going to sell this book, Joseph's Journey, on my biography, taking up 40 pages, and my RAF career. And then we come into the last 60 odd pages of the book, which can be cross-referenced to get even more information, because everything about that section and my inventions is on Google. And then thirdly, this book has a capability and a link to a film, a 12-minute film, which is currently on Heart Radio's website. So we have a book which is a threefer. It's going to retail at roughly £12.90 a copy, but we have people inquiring already about this book, and we have 2 draft copies, and we're talking about publishing as many as 20 million over the next decade, because I've made it a requirement that if I'm to give my technical ability into a giant trust fund for every young person who's a British citizen and is aged from 30 down to 1 and can own it, that they know who I am, why I'm doing it, and why I'm gifting it to the young people. It's so that no government can interfere with the process, and so the only comparable situation in Europe at the moment is the Sovereign Wealth Fund in Norway, and they have been investing their oil and gas money into British companies for the last 40 years, and they now own £500 billion worth. So the future for all you young children and grandparents, etc., because if you support these principles that we are putting forward, then the situation can be, we can give you cheaper, greener electricity. The second thing is we can do the same for your hospitals and schools on a huge scale and save millions of pounds in taxpayers' money.